but I'm here to tell you about the historical uses of herbs and how they were used in medicine in the past and how they're currently used in science. And what I just played for you is called Scarborough Fair. And I'm sorry that she just left because she's actually a very good singer. And she probably could have given us a lovely rendition of Scarborough Fair. But when we think of this song, we think of medieval times and tunes, and we don't really give much thought to why the song was there. We think it's just for our entertainment. But when she's singing, "Are you going to Scarborough Fair?" she's saying, "Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to one who lives there. He once was a true love of mine. Remember me." And what does that tell you? Well, in the Clan Bruce, it says, "Remember me," and that was one of your hints. Well, that is rosemary. Rosemary has rosmarinic acid. And inside that acid, there's what's called an antioxidant. And the reason why this is very important is because we have compounds in plants that are called active preventers. In other words, by the use of them, the regular use of these plants, we can actually prevent certain things from occurring, such as cancer. So a lot of the plants that used to be used by the first people, such as our ancestors and also the Native Americans, those plants have been determined to be scientifically valid. In other words, everything that your mother once told you was good for you actually really is. And all of those wives' tales that we were told were just, oh, you know, some lady carrying on about her teeth, were actually and are very valid. So rosmarinic acid is an important plant because what it does is, as an active preventer, it actively works against what many people are concerned about now, which is called Alzheimer's disease. Now, rosemary is an antioxidant. It improves memory. It has antiviral, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and it is what's known as a GABA, and I'll spell it for you because it is difficult, is transferase inhibitor. It's what's called a defense compound. And when we say defense compound, we're talking about something that, if used regularly, can help prevent such diseases as Alzheimer's. And this is proven. It's been scientifically demonstrated, independently developed in German labs. And furthermore, in Europe, they dispense this in plant form at the pharmacy. This weed that your ancestors threw in your salad on a regular basis is actually something that can prevent, when used regularly, can prevent Alzheimer's. So this is important. Now, when we're looking at our plant hints, one of them was, what is crimson and goes over and over? You have to be from my generation to get this one. So anyone? Clover, that's right. So, and what's important about clover? Well, other than the fact that your ancestors and my ancestors used it in Europe regularly as an edible food, they used clover the way we'd use salad. So your ancestors, the Scottish ancestors, all used clover, and they introduced it to the United States. This is not a Native American plant. Neither is rosemary. They brought these with them. So what is clover? It's called Trifolium repens. Red clover is a perennial. You can find it in your lawn. It's been brought over with Europeans, and the American Indians adopted it. Well, why? They discovered, just like our early ancestors and their neighbors, the colonists, that it was good for colds. Well, it contains estrogenic isoflavone, you know, isoflavone, and I'm certain that many of you have been educated on this. And it includes, and I'll spell it for you, Genistein. This is a cancer preventative, and it also has been smoked in anti-asthma cigarettes. Now, when President Obama said, don't smoke clove cigarettes, he wasn't talking about clover cigarettes. In Europe, they actually dispense clover in cigarette forms. And it actually does assist and help with asthma. Well, why? because it has biologically active compounds that are called phytoestrogenic isoflavones. Genistein, diacetin, formonetin, and bicochanin A, B-I-O-C-H-A-N-I-N-A. That's a very important compound to remember. And I'll say it for you again, bicochanin A, B-I-O-C-H-A-N-I-N. Why? Because the dietary components can have such a significant effect on the incidence and location of cancers in humans that it has been approved in Europe in its plant form as something that can be dispensed at the pharmacy. So instead of getting your pills and your shots, you're getting clover. Now, when you're out there killing off your clover and trying to make sure your lawn looks good, think carefully. Maybe that clover is something you might want to dig up and just keep it around for a while. If you use it in your salad regularly, it can actually act as an inhibitor, or again, the word defense compound against cancer. This is very important. It's scientifically proven in European independent labs. And when I say independent labs, that means that there is no company saying, I want this pill to go on the market. There's no special interest group saying, if you guys do the research on it and it goes my way, then you'll get some money for this. There's none of that. Because this is a weed. This is found in everybody's lawn. So there's no money to be gained from anyone taking this plant and saying this is good. If anything, people who, and one of them happened to be Scott's Lawn Service, would rather have you buy their grass seed. Okay, so if anything, keeping a weed around is not good for some people's interests. Yes?
Is that kin to the white clover?
White clover and red clover do exactly the same thing, because both of them are repins, which is part of the same family. So these clovers, you can eat them, they're tasty, you can throw them in a salad, have some every day. And if you want to season something, you want to go out and barbecue and grill, take a piece of rosemary, and you can actually, some of the rosemary now is so thick and so strong that you can actually grill on it, you can put your meat on it. And so you can do a lot with rosemary now that you used to not be able to, because we're growing more of it now. So it's starting to look like the original European plant that came over with some of our ancestors. And believe me, they brought them over. Now, fall and late cut clover is unsafe, so you don't want to eat any clover in the fall. But diseased clover, believe it or not, even though it's bad to be eaten, is still good. If you can believe this, diseased clover contains alkaloid sulforamine, which is now being studied for anti-AIDS. Think about it. So even when this clover is bad, it's being good. And this is our weed. This is the inheritance that we have from our ancestors, because this is what they ate daily. This is the type of vegetation, the vegetables that they ate. They didn't just let their sheep and their cattle and their, grazing animals eat it. They ate it as well. And so it's also being studied for anti-diabetic activity. But it is definitely proven, independently and scientifically proven and confirmed as what we call a defense compound. So there it is. Dig it up. Instead of throwing that weed away, try it in your salad.
Do you eat it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Washed carefully.
You're still alive.
No, it's clever. Our ancestors have actually, no, I don't use any insecticides.
No, I mean, some of these people probably do, so I'm just.
Pesticides, yeah. Well, it's no more than what they use in agriculture. When you go to buy an apple, when you go to buy an orange, when you go to buy anything at the market, you're getting pesticides. So in my yard, I don't use pesticides. And I tell everyone, regardless of where you get it, whether it's the store, the market, Whole Foods, and they do sell clover out west. You go to the grocery store and you can buy clover anytime, because they're pretty much like the Europeans. They're like, hey, my ancestors must have been doing something right. So they've got this in the grocery stores, and it's nice and big and it's cultivated. But when you go to the grocery store, you should wash everything you get. everything, and carefully, because you don't know what they're going to be using. They say organic, but you're never quite sure what organic means. Is that cow manure? What is that? So you have to think carefully about it. Now, what would have been used by early settlers to give off a sweet smell and was called an herb by them, but really isn't? Can you find something here that might qualify? Anyone?
The thing with the sweet smell.
Well, this right here is loblolly pine. And these little tiny seedlings are what they called herbs. And how do I know this? You're like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. By our definition now, an herb says herb on it. It's in the market, and it's rosemary. It's parsley, sage, rosemary, or thyme. So those are herbs. Well, in the old days, their idea of herbs and plants were kind of grouped together. And there's no way any good housewife or good servant or good anyone would have taken their best herbs and thrown them on the ground. They wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have taken their rosemary because they actually remembered that rosemary could benefit them medicinally. So they were still using herbs in the same way we would medicine. Can you think of someone taking their necessary thyroid or cholesterol pill and throwing them all on the ground? They're not going to do that. That would be throwing medicine pills on the ground, or taking their daily shot of diabetes and liquid and throwing it down there. They wouldn't do that. So what was called herbs were actually these pine seedlings. And when I was at the conference house up in Staten Island, where I learned that my ancestors, Powell, Ben Franklin, and a few others got together for the original peace conference to try to negotiate with the British to prevent war. These guys actually had a lot of peace conferences. They actually attempted to try to negotiate with the British, but we all know how that went. So they tried. They were at the conference house in Staten Island on the corner, which is right across the waterway from New Jersey. And they took all of these pine seedlings and they strew them all over the floor. And when you walk in, when you have this type of pine seedling, it actually does let off a really fresh odor. And so they would have taken any number of herbs or plants with a nice fresh smell and threw them on the floor. When you think of rushes, things like that, this is what they would have used. So when they were talking about herbs, they weren't talking about our traditional sense of what an herb is. They're actually talking about pine seedlings and things that smell good. And when you walk, there's nothing probably fresher than the smell of small pines. And I don't mean the large, cedar, but they could easily be cedars. Any type of small seedlings such as this. And they would have used what was growing around them. So they wouldn't have used their medicine. They wouldn't have used herbs. They wouldn't have thrown them on the ground.